do you feel something? I think as marketers, I think we can't only go to a data piece, but it's like, do you feel something? Do you as a team feel something? That's where I think even just trying to get some ideas outside of your internal marketing team to get other people. And then once they start to like, I felt something, it's like, that's what you want. And it's like, if you don't have that, I think it's like, go back to the drawing board.
On this podcast, we go behind the scenes with industry experts as they break down what it takes to produce creative work that works. If you're seeking insights from some of the sharpest minds in the industry, this is your guidebook to producing creative work that actually delivers. Welcome to the Backcountry Marketing Podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Mike Donnelly, the VP of Marketing at Superfeet. Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Cole. Appreciate it. Excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining this show. So the episode that will have come out prior to this episode, we just did an interview with Sorel, and they're going through a rebrand also. And so we dove deep into the weeds and kind of broke that out, dissected it, and here we are talking with you. So that's exciting times. I'm excited to bring you on to chat about kind of everything you guys are working on, kind of dig into the weeds as well into this rebrand, and really just try to understand the why, the process, what you're discovering along the way, the challenges, and kind of break it all out for us. So to start, how would you rate this rebrand experience? Has it been an A+ experience or a C or a D experience, just based on the overall work and effort and mental fortitude that it's taken to kind of work through all this?
No, I think we're really excited in how it came to life. I think there's always trepidation going into these things of like, how are consumers, how's media, how's our retail partners going to respond to this? But coming out of the rebrand, we had an event in New York City. The positive response that we received from both consumers as well as kind of our partners around the industry have been really positive. So I guess I'd give ourselves an A on this one, just because I do think we've gotten some positive feedback. Always areas to improve for sure, but overall, we're really excited about how it turned out.
Yeah, and can you kind of give us the high-level overview? What elements of the brand have stayed the same and what's changed?
Quite a lot has changed, quite frankly, because it's we basically took a look at kind of the brand, and it's been around for a while, and it's just like we haven't really kind of refreshed, I would say, the brand in probably over 20 years, which is quite a long time. So what went into it is just like we changed the logo, we changed the font, we changed the colors, we changed the look, the feel, the tonality. So I think when you're looking at kind of all the brand elements that actually go into it, we changed quite a lot. So it was quite a big departure where we were. And a lot of that goes into like where we changed the positioning, our consumer and so forth. But I would say a majority of the things that we had in our brand is evolved and changed.
Yeah. Can you kind of walk us through what led to this rebrand? Why put in all this work to change it all up?
Yeah.
What's the history and what wasn't working and what is working now with this new direction?
It's interesting. We've been Superfeet's been around for nearly 50 years, 48 years, and we've always been one that really sets the pace for the industry. And as you start to look at the insole industry right now, it is competitive. There is a lot of different competing brands that are coming into the space, and quite frankly, we actually see that as a positive. We actually see that that's actually just growing share and growing a conversation to like how insoles can not only be kind of like pain relief, but it also can kind of be a performance enhancer as well. So when we're looking at the competition, it actually just puts us, gets us more competitive, and it allows us to kind of really dive into and take a deeper look at ourselves. So we were like, are we setting the pace? Are we really actually kind of like, pushing ourselves forward? We took a really kind of good look at ourselves and we actually took a step back and said, where did we start as an overall brand? 48 years ago, why did we start? And we started serving athletes, and we started on ski slopes, skiers, and even, to a lesser extent, a couple years later, hockey players as well. So we started serving athletes at the highest level. Then that kind of like that pinnacle innovation, that pinnacle performance, obviously cascaded it down to the masses. So we took a look a step and we said, are we doing that today? And we said we were kind of serving a lot of different people, very kind of like at a broad perspective. We always want to be inclusive, but we felt like we lost the sharp point. Did we have a sharp point of the consumer? Do we have a sharp point on kind of a positioning as a brand? And we actually, those questions we answered were no. So that is kind of the impetus of why we started like, and we really kind of like said, where do we start? And how do we actually get back to where we did and where we started? So that was the why, which basically then transformed into all the things that, we'll obviously kind of get into and talk about and kind of what you see as the brand today.
Yeah, I'm curious. So, if the brand had kind of lost its sharp point, as you said, was that reflective in the business and the revenue and the market share amongst all the other competitors? Is that what also led to this?
We're still an industry leader. So I just think it's like it's even less about kind of revenue. I think we always look at ourselves and like not just judging ourselves on revenue, but like where do we see we can go? And we've always been a growth company and we continue to grow. But I also think we have some pretty kind of like big targets for ourselves, not only to kind of like, grow our revenue, of course, but like how do we actually just invite new consumers and help them? Because we actually feel like we're actually a purpose driven brand. It's just like we have insoles and they may just be in your shoes. But we feel like that's a huge unlock for consumers to go out there and it's just like, are we helping them? Are we helping them move better? And if you're moving better, you're going to actually have a healthier and happier life. So we actually feel like the more people we can get actually and help consumers, which is a bigger order or bigger kind of like higher kind of aspiration. Yeah, of course the revenue is going to come along the way, but we actually feel like that is our first kind of order or first kind of priority. And then yes, all the other stuff then comes as a secondary response to that.
I'm curious. Let's back up a little bit. What's been your history within the industry, and how many rebrands have you been a part of?
Less rebrands, but it's like I've been in marketing for over 20 years. I started as, like we'll get into like athletes and then can ask me mindset. I started as an athlete, a long distance runner. Uh, uh, I did that, through college. I did that professionally for a few years. It's just like kind of just going into kind of like what goes into a mindset of an athlete. And that really is just getting better. Doesn't have to be super hardcore, doesn't have to be intense. It just because like, do you want to get better than the day before? And it doesn't have to be huge incremental gains, but just small kind of incremental, consistent gains over time. And then, I spent 20 years, I spent 20 years at Nike and was very fortunate to learn from a lot of great marketing leaders. So I've taken that throughout the times and like really kind of like used that to influence kind of, obviously went into Superfeet and the rebrand and just kind of harken back some of those lessons and some of those kind of like systematic approaches that, I did in the past and now kind of did it into this Superfeet brand.
Yeah. So, if you had to kind of look at branding as a whole throughout the industry, and I'm curious, is it more or less important now than it was? And I know that's a very vague, kind of generic question, and maybe it's a leading question, but I'm curious to hear how you respond to that.
I think branding is obviously really important. It's like what your brand stands for. You have to have a mark that you feel conveys what the brand stands for. And I think when we went into a rebrand, it wasn't just a logo, but what does that logo kind of represent and what does that entail? We believe in movement. So we wanted that logo to feel like it actually conveyed movement. We also wanted to go back and to felt like did it feel like performance? Did it feel, really kind of in that zone? Did it feel bold? Did it feel confident? So I think it's just like a logo could be a logo, but it's like what goes behind it and the decisions and the kind of the filters that we went through are really important. So I think it is important. It is always important. I think there's a lot of brands out there that, hold a lot of equity within their logo. So I think it's important. I also think it's important of like what are the things that you do around that logo as well. How do you storytell? Like what do you convey? What are your purpose? How do you actually kind of like, live and breathe behind it? It's important, but it's also kind of like all the things that go and surround it.
So, there's a lot of ways that people try to define brand. One way to define it is that I've heard that I like is it's not what you say about the brand, it's what your audience or your customer says about you. I'm curious, what has the audience been saying about Superfeet over the last 10, 20 years? And what do you hope for them to say about Superfeet moving forwards once this new rebrand is out into the world? And, there's been some re-education.
Yeah. I think what consumers would say about the brand right now is we're trusted. And I think it's like we have a great product that they they believe in and they stick with. It's interesting. It's like, we still have a kind of like we still believe we have an opportunity to get more brand awareness out around Superfeet. But when you say it's like, hey, I work at Superfeet, like, oh, Superfeet, oh my gosh, that's great. And it's like they literally on the street, they'll take off their shoes and be like, I got it, I share it. And it's just like they're proud. And I think that is a huge, huge testament of how proud they are to kind of like, I've heard it, I know it, and I believe in it. So we have a loyal following of consumers. So I do think it's a trusted product, and it is, it is at the top of the industry. It's interesting because it's like even when we went to the rebrand, it's like we were working back with an agency partner as well, and it's like one of the things was like a hidden source of truth, and like that could be a campaign, that could be something that we could really lean into. And I think when we started going back even through kind of like the visual explorations of just kind of doing and through an X-ray vision, because it's like I do think like the challenge and the opportunity, as you mentioned, it's unseen. It literally goes in your shoe, and once you lace up the shoe, you don't even know it's there. So I think that's the opportunity for us to get Superfeet more kind of visible to more people. And we have a few kind of ideas up our sleeves, like in future seasons to bring that to life, let more people know that this is not a best kept secret, but this is something that you should put in your shoe because it can unlock quite a lot.
I wonder if that actually gives you freedom as a brand, because a lot of brands, there's a lot of, at least in the circles that I run, and a lot of people talk about like, oh, how much do you show product? Is it very product focused? Is it more brand focused? Almost by default, unless if you're showing somehow the inside of the shoe or someone putting an insole into their shoe, it's almost entirely brand focused because it inherently can't be focused on product, right? How do you think through when it comes to your content and your creative efforts? How do you think through that?
I think a differentiator and something that we really want to lean into is more around kind of that emotive inspiration storytelling. So I think to your point, it's just like, okay, let's start to show people in action, in movement, in motion, really showing that emotive piece. If you can kind of sell the dream of what a run could look like with Superfeed and Soul, a walk around New York City, a 12-hour shift for the industrial athlete that we look to. If you can show kind of like that more inspiring piece, versus just trying to be super transactional. One of the kind of the from twos that we wanted, like from transactional to aspirational. We can actually talk about the insole, we can talk about performance media marketing and so forth, but it is like it's just noise, quite frankly, to consumers. And they have so many things coming up them. How do we actually create, a bit more inspiration, aspiration, get them to stop in their tracks to like, hey, that looks cool. I would love to be part of that. How do I get that some of that kind of a dream? It only takes this insole in your shoe as a little bit of the kind of like the things that we'd want to try to connect back together. So you're right. I think it's like when you do product marketing, it's also interesting. We have some interesting ways of like how we could actually elevate product, but I do think there's a bigger opportunity to create that emotional, aspirational connection into the brand. Then yes, the insole is just the enabler versus trying to do it the flip way around.
So I just wrote down motion and emotion, and I'm sure you've realized this already, but there's something very, well, how can you show the emotion in motion? Is what I'm thinking. That sounds like a really cool platform to be able to jump off from.
100%, because we believe movement is actually a huge unlock. So I think, how do we actually just showcase like the more you move, the better it gets? A little bit of like that sentiment and that idea.
So when you say you want to do more emotive storytelling with the brand, like what does that mean to you? Because I would have my own definition, but I'm curious how you would define that.
I think it's more tying back into aspirational storytelling that gets you excited to go out and just do, I'm going to call it sport. I'm going to call sport very broad, but it's like that looks like that run looks just like something so amazing. I want to be a part of it, but I never really could do that because I didn't feel like I could do it, or I didn't have the right kind of, my ankle or my Achilles. We believe that it's like if we can create kind of that kind of like emotional tug that says like, maybe I never thought about running, but that just looks like I would want to do it because it looks fun, it looks enjoyable, it looks exciting. How do we actually just get them into the sport first? And then second, how do we actually then get them into a product versus the ad, like, the reverse? Sometimes I think we can get into very kind of like tactical ways of like the product, how does it bend? Like it just becomes less kind of like, emotively connected to a consumer.
Yeah. So what does that look like? What plans do you have in place? What storytelling projects are you working on, or do you hope to be working on?
We have we have seasonal storytelling, and we also have kind of like bigger product opportunities as well. So I think, something that I'll kind of give you just an example of what we're trying to do in the short term. Right now, we're going back into a back to school, back to sport. So, what does that look like, and how do we actually start to kind of connect into that? So, we have a bit of a creative brief around this idea around new feels, and we believe like feels is something really emotive. When you're getting back into like when you go back into sport and going back into school, what are the feels you get after coming out of the tunnel for the first time for a football game? What is the feel that you cross the finish line for the first time? What is the feel that you put your fresh kicks on, you walking back to school for the first time? It's like those emotive feels. How do we actually then translate that into a story
Mm.
and content and story? Because we believe like that emotive feeling can actually then obviously connect back into a product, and like the feel can also be the feel underfoot as well. So I think the double entendre around feel is really important.
Yeah, that word inspiration is such a common word that's used in the outdoor athletic industry. And I feel like very little of the work that actually gets produced is actually truly inspirational, right? Where
Yeah.
you're overwhelmed with this feeling of I have to get outside and go on that run. Um, as you're developing creative briefs and as you're developing these campaigns, you could go like 80% of the way there with the emotion, or you could go 100% of the way there. How do you ensure that you go past that 80% into that next level where it's truly emotive and people truly feel? Because I think it's really easy to go out, shoot a
Yeah.
commercial, put some epic music to it, and be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
people are gonna love this." But it's another commercial in the sea of sameness. How do you take that to the next level?
Well, you said see a sameness. I think that's a good filter. And that's always what we did. It's like, is it differentiated? Is it distinct? And is it going to cut through the clutter? I think is one filter that we have to look at, because I do think there is a lot of stuff out there. It's not even just the insole, because it's like consumers are not just having insole communication. It has a lot of it, so how do we actually judge ourselves against that? It's a tall order, right? Because I think obviously a smaller brand and a bigger fish, or a bigger sea. But I do think it's like if we can go with that aspiration of like, can you feel something? And it's like if you're sitting in, like, we have creative review meetings. Do you feel something? Do you feel like goosebumps? Do you feel like, and you just like sometimes, and this is where it's like the art and science, the data and so forth. But it's like, I think as marketers, I think we can't only go to a data piece, but it's like, do you feel something? Do you as a team feel something? Do you even, and like that's where I think even just trying to get some ideas outside of your internal marketing team to get other people. And then once they start to like, I felt something, it's like, like I felt it. That's what you want. And it's like if you don't have that, I think it's like go back to the drawing board. Go back into the creative room, like continue to push it. It maybe will not always get there, but I think it's like, are we getting better? And I think that's the other thing. It's like when we go into this athlete mindset, it's around progress. Are we going to get to 100%? We're going to strive to get to 100%, of course. Are we going to get to 80%? Maybe, but we're going to always strive for 100%. And it's like, hopefully that 80% becomes 82%, 84%. And like that idea of like always continuing to push
Yeah. No, I love that. So let's talk about your audience, because obviously the audience is a big component of knowing when creative feels right, right? Talk to me about how your audience, the understanding of your audience has changed. You've obviously talked a little bit about it, this idea
Yeah.
of performance and, an athlete doesn't mean you're on a podium, but what have you learned about your customer through this rebrand that you didn't know about them prior?
Yeah. I think if we even just take a step back, I just think it's like who are we serving? Who's our target consumer at the end of the day? And trying to get really sharp on who those consumers are.
So there's kind of a few different ways you can better understand your audience. There's the persona route. There's the jobs to be done. There's a muse. How do you choose? How did you choose the persona route and versus some of the other options out there?
We had different kind of we obviously we had the target consumer groups, and then we had personas that fit within them. We called them optimizer. Those are the ones that are really want to kind of get better for their sport. The preventer is a little bit more of those that just want to prevent getting injured. So there's different personas that fit within these consumer target groups. So it
Gotcha.
helps us kind of like when we say, what is the kind of the persona of the sport athlete? We then look at the optimizer. Why the optimizer? They are sitting at the top, but they are the most discerning. They are the ones that influence it all the way down. So I think it's really important, like the sport athlete or the industrial, like it's still very broad, but how do we actually get to the most discerning, the ones that kind of influence the rest of everyone else? Really important when we're starting to kind of put together a creative filter. Does this feel right? Are we who are we talking to? Obviously, into that broader macro group.
And as you've been building out and getting to better understand your customer base, what have you learned about them that gives you emotion, the clues into their emotional state? Things, triggers, levers that you can then use to pair that with great creative that speaks to them emotionally.
It's interesting because I think right now it's like, who do we have and who do we want? I think who do we have is we have a very loyal base, like I mentioned before, super loyal base that is really passionate about Superfeet, willing to take off the shoes in the street to go to shows. We want to keep that. Like that is something magical, and we want to continue to serve them. The bigger opportunity is how do we actually get more people into the brand? How do we invite new consumers in? So I don't want to like the emotion connection. I think we have with our consumers, and a lot of that emotional connection comes back to like they like the they love our product. They like how what we stand for as an overall brand, and we want to keep that. We just want to add on and making sure that we can invite new consumers into the brand, not only serving those that may have pain relief or kind of like those, but also how do we actually kind of open the aperture up and just like how do we invite new ones into the brand that may not know that we have a performance product that can actually help them perform on the pitch, on the field, on the road, etc.
Mm. So what I'm hearing then is maybe to extrapolate that further is if there's people out there who don't know your product exists and they're the type of people who maybe have an injury and don't know that, hey, maybe actually I can go for a run. Maybe that emotional component that you can tie into is this idea of pursuing something that you once thought you couldn't do. Like that's a really
Yeah,
powerful emotive idea.
that's exactly right. Cool. That's our thought, and that's our kind of process going in. And I also think there's like a lot of people don't know the power of insoles. It's like many people like, and I think that's the bigger opportunity. That's why I mentioned it's like even competitors in this space, the more we can actually have a conversation that these insoles can really help you perform better, I think is a huge unlock because there's very little awareness that that actually uh,
Mm.
is a thing. So I think we have a huge hurdle, not a huge hurdle, but a huge opportunity. The marketplace and the market, total addressable market is massive. How do we then start to kind of chip away at that to kind of at least get those people into insoles and superfeed insoles more specifically?
Talk to me about the idea of patience. And this is something you discussed in our intro call. The idea of we want to do so much, but obviously we can only do so much. What role does patience play as the leader of this whole rebrand?
I'm always going to go back to the athlete and kind of analogies around athletes. So I think it's like athletes always have goals, and it's like they want goals, and they want to achieve those goals fast. I think the thing that we always need to be kind of cognizant around of like how do we be consistent? And again, going back to like 1/8 of 1%, I think sometimes we have aspirations to just go quicker and faster. We have some big aspirations. And when we talked about this, it's like, how do we create emotion? How do we create inspiration? You can't do that overnight. How do we build a community? How do we build relationships? Relationships take time. You can't do that overnight, So I think when we start to kind of like look back to like, how do we recreate the category? How do we actually invite new people into the sport? How do we actually put performance at the center? Those are big tasks and those are big ideas. Can that happen? It's like, oh, in Q1, did we do it? We have to kind of just, and that's the patience, which I think is like athletes don't have a lot of patience. But I think that's where it's just like as a team of like, okay, can we take a step back and be like, did we get better than last quarter? And if we got better, then great. Then we're moving in the right trajectory and in the right path. And the next one is just consistency. I think it's hard to have consistency sometimes because I think we always look to start like, what's the shiny object? What's the thing over here? But if we're really consistent week over week, day over day, quarter over quarter, I think then over time, we'll see some big gains. But I think instead of having those big gains of like in 2 months and 3 months, and I think we do a rebrand to like, we just rebrand. What's happening? Like, what's next? Like, it's like, it's just going to take a bit of time. Just because we did a rebrand doesn't mean like the whole world's going to change and like everyone's going to like start to flood to Superfeet. We just need to be incremental and small gains over time.
There's an episode we did a couple years ago with Jordan Williams, and he talked about he's done had a bunch of different roles: Red Bull, Smart Wool, REI, I believe it, and he talks about patience being one of the most powerful tools that a marketer has, because one, it forces you to think in the long term, and two, it's kind of like compound interest, right? If you play the long game, it slowly builds over time, and this is, I think, in part where some of that tension between brand and performance marketing lies. And I'm curious if you could kind of speak to how you think about brand and performance, or brand formance, the fusion of the two, as you're moving forward in this rebrand.
Well, this is the $1 million question, right? Today, it's just like, how do you do both? And it's like you have to do both, but I think they have to be balanced. If it goes one way or the other, then I think kind of like it breaks the equilibrium. I strongly believe that you have to create a brand and you have to create some of that storytelling, that inspirational storytelling. If you just go all performance, you're not building a brand. And if you're not building a brand, you're not creating an emotional connection with consumers, then it's just transactional. And it's like consumers will not stay with you. They will not follow you. They will not feel your values. They won't not feel like you as an individual, as a person. So strongly believe that you need to do both, but it has to be equal weighting. But I do so strongly believe on the brand building piece, and that's another one. Is just like, how do we actually do brand marketing storytelling? Typically, a lot of like in this space, there's not a lot of brand building. We believe Superfeet has been around for 48 years. There is a brand. We actually feel like we need to kind of accelerate and kind of take what we've had in the past and just kind of like amplify it, put it on steroids, like really kind of like move that one forward. So brand building is really where we want to put our energy and focus over the next. It's not quarters, but it is like over to your point. It's over time because it is really important.
You talked about campaigns and commercials that you're working on. Are you paying attention or investing at all into branded content specifically with this emphasis placed on brand?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, and I think even some of the things that we did around the rebrand itself, and kind of just like, what does Superfeed stand for? What is it? Who are we? What is performance? What does it mean? So I do think that's really important, and it's just like, yes, we have content there, and how do we actually just show that in a tangible, digestible, emotive way? We did a 60-second kind of like, piece of content that came out. And it's just content, but it also like it helped us kind of define the North Star where we're trying to go. That's where we want to try to go. So then that is just quote unquote just a piece of content. But it was also a good filter for us to like, how does all that start to add? Like, how does that kind of add into our social storytelling? Because that's what's really important. Like, how do we continue to connect with our kind of consumers on a daily basis? How do we connect with our retailers who are going to our stores? How do we connect with athletes, sponsored athletes of ourselves? How do we connect with people in the field? But it was just a good litmus test for us of like, that is Superfeet. That's who we are, and that's how we should act and how we should behave. And it was a really good kind of a litmus test for everyone on our team. That's who we are, and that's what we want. That's how we should be showing up every day.
What about any sort of like branded storytelling pieces? You've mentioned that being an emphasis. I guess I'm thinking about that in terms of like, the typical 3 to 10 minute short on athletes and ambassadors, and you do that a handful of times, gets thrown up on YouTube. I have a lot of opinions on like the success of those and how to really make those things pop. But is that something that you guys are interested in? Have you considered, serial content, like producing your own podcast, anything along those types of lines?
We're still working through a lot of like the mediums that we'd love to kind of come back into. Right now we're really focused on building our social storytelling and our community. How we're really kind of going back into like, how do we storytell at retail? Like, how are we, showing up in the consumer's path in the right way at the right time at the right moment? And then we'll then start to kind of add on some of those other elements a little bit later. But we'll really go back to like, what's the foundation? How we're actually being in the consumer's path at the right moments at the right moments of time, and like being awesome at foundation. And then we can start adding on kind of other elements as we go forward.
What's something that you've learned throughout this rebrand that you weren't expecting you would learn?
Um, I still think when you go back into a rebrand like this, we believe it's the biggest thing. It is like, we believe in a rebrand and everything is like it's really important. When you start to communicate to retailers and media, it's like, yeah, it's important, but it's like sometimes it may not be as important to them as it is to us. When we went into the media event, we always went in there with the hypothesis we get a lot more coverage around just the rebrand. Fortuitously, we also coupled that with new innovative products. The new innovative products is really what consumers really want to get and digest. And it's new innovative product as well. I think the great learning coming out of that was like product is king. And product, it really is like when you have innovative product that's actually going to get people excited about that, that's what really kind of carried it over the top. I think coupling them together was great, but I just think the product piece of it and the energy and the excitement that consumers, retailers, our partners got from the product was awesome. I think the rebrand itself, it's like I think did we get as excited? I think yes, to some degree, but maybe not as much as we potentially thought going in.
Interesting. I mean, I think I can answer the question why that might be. It's like, it is something we talk about here at Portside is when it comes to content, when it comes to brands, like the audience doesn't care. Generally, they don't care what you have to say. And so you have to show up in a way that's interesting
Yeah,
and worth their time. And a rebrand doesn't mean anything to them until you
yeah,
prove that it means something to them. Product, on the other hand, is like, oh, this is for me. I get
yeah,
it. People are selfish. But a rebrand, obviously, it sets you up with the right foundation to
yes.
then go out and prove to the audience why it matters. But that's interesting. You saw that in your release and having that comparison between the product release and the brand release. That's intriguing.
It
Um,
helps us internally, and I think it's just like
sure.
to your point. It's just like consumers like, so what? Show me that. Like, show me. It's like if you really believe the athlete, you believe in performance, you believe in athlete storytelling. Okay, tell me. And I think
Right.
and that's the consistency piece. It's like, right? It's like, hey, we did rebrand. It's like, is the job done? And we said, it's like, no. Like, is that the finish line? No, no, no. Like, that's the starting line. We just like that, like literally got to the line. Now is now is the time to really kind of start to kind of like put our money where our mouth is, so to speak. So 100% agree with you.
In a really cliche way, you have now found the perfect insoles to put into your shoes to then start the race with.
Exactly, 100%. So it's like the analogies from like these athletes and stuff like that in sport is they're endless for sure.
I could come up with a lot of bad puns and dad jokes, I'm sure, if you gave me more time. But Mike, we are running out of time, and something that we like to do is end each episode on failures. It doesn't have to be specific to this rebrand, but what are failures that you have experienced or that you have committed over your 20 years in the industry, and what have you learned from them?
I think well, I think this there's small and there's small ones. I think even just with this rebrand, I think we started to go in, and I think sometimes you go in there with some ideas that may just not pan out. And I think when we started looking at our consumer segmentation, we did, we just like this is a tactical one, but it just went to a photo shoot. We did, a photo shoot that was in studio, and it really worked well for the sport athlete. It worked well ish for the city athlete, but it did not work well for the industrial athlete. The industrial athlete, it needs to be authentic. It needs to be in. You can't fake it. You can't fake a staged someone working in an environment. So it's like when we came out of that, you're like, oof, we just didn't feel
Hmm.
right. So I think that's where it's like we didn't use some of that content and we had to go back to some others. So I think that like whether there's a failure, it's just like it's just a good kind of litmus test. It's like you always have to be authentic and you always have to connect back into who you're trying to serve um, at the end of the day. So I think that was like a tactical one for the rebrand itself. I think, and then bigger kind of like learnings and opportunities along the way. Um, I also, yeah, I think a big learning is you always need to bring teams along the way because I just think sometimes it's like you can't kind of like force something that is not kind of like uh team built along the way. And I just think, it's like learnings from the past, which we haven't done that. You haven't actually brought a team and collectively gone into this one. At Superfeet, it was really important to do that because I do think it was such a big shift. If you just and like I was new to the team. Like I've only been at Superfeet for 6 months. So it's like you can't like when we started to kind of make this massive shift, you needed the collective team that had been around. And I really kind of like leveraged the team in there. They've been around the brand. They know what it stands for. And I think it's really important. You can't have it's just an outsider coming in of like, okay, this is it. This is what we're going to try to do. It's like, why is the brand here? Why did the brand set? So it was really helpful for me to come in, leverage the team. What does the brand stand for? Where did we start from? And I was like, I just asked questions and they basically filled in the blank. And then that led us into this. So I think kind of key learnings in the past is like if you're trying to force something and you're going to basically like, this is it. And then you tell the team, this is what we're going to do. They reject it. And I think that's always kind of like it never like a force feeding is never helpful. So that was the learning that I came in, especially coming in new to a brand, for over 6 months. I leveraged the team. I asked dumb questions. I really kind of leveraged the team and I just asked questions and they basically are the ones that really kind of built this and kind of, built, built the proposition, the positioning, and the athletes, the
Hmm.
consumer targets. So
That's cool. I mean, sometimes that's what it takes, right? Is a fresh perspective, someone coming in, asking new questions or old questions, and then just we're looking at it from a different perspective, which seems like is kind of the dynamic you had coming into the brand and then working with the team there.
just curiosity. And I think it's just like, and sometimes the questions are just prompt questions. And and I think, and it is, to your point, it's a fresh perspective, but I think a fresh perspective, but you have to listen. And that's where it's like, that's where like I really wanted to come in here and listen first, ask questions versus having a preconceived point of view. heading into it. Because if you do that,
Mm.
then you need the team to be kind of like 100% bought in on this, because this is the brand. This is this is like, I mean, they need to kind of like be bought in, and not only did they buy in, they were the authors of it, which I think is even more important.
Yeah, that's powerful. Mike, as we wrap things up, if you had to kind of summarize everything we've talked about today, and for folks who are maybe in the middle of a rebrand themselves or anticipating a rebrand on the horizon, what sort of practical kind of next steps or advice would you give to folks? Sounds like asking questions, being curious, listening is a big one. What else would you want to leave folks with before we sign off?
I think it's like ask the questions for sure. I also think, who are you serving at the end of the day? And it's like, if you don't know who you're serving, it sounds simple and it sounds easy, but really decide and define who you're serving at the end of the day. Because if you're not sharp on your target and you're not sharp on your consumer, it's really, really, really hard to make decisions along the way. We spend a lot of time on that one, and we continue to do that. It's not like we define a consumer, but that consumer evolves really, really quickly. So we continue to kind of like really make sure that we're listening to the consumer. What are the things that they want, to define that? So I think consumer is really kind of the sharp point of any, like, a lot of our kind of decision making down the process.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and share with us, give us a peek behind the hood. Sounds like we should all stay, for the next year or so. We should check in here and now with the brand and see how things are evolving. But I'm excited for you guys. It sounds like you've got a great foundation and things are just getting started.
I appreciate your time, and yeah, excited to talk to you today. Thank you.
Have a good day.
All right.
Chat soon.
Bye.